Each year, thousands of criminal cases are heard in courts around Australia. Here, some of the most serious crimes are heard before judge and jury. This is where justice is done. Now, for the first time in Australia, cameras have been allowed to film a murder trial.
This is not a whodunit trial.
How can that be anything but a reference to the other states?
I might not be allowed to believe in an afterlife, but perfection's certainly not here.
Court, all please stand.
On trial is Anthony Evans, a 34-year-old mechanic from Perth, Western Australia. He stands accused of murdering partner Alana Dakin in November 2007.
She was the sort of girl that would stand out in a crowd, and she almost took over when she walked into a room.
Alana was last seen in a Perth bottle shop. 3 hours later, she was dead on her lounge room floor.
It's believed a violent argument broke out between the couple at their Girraween home just after midnight.
You know, you just can't believe it. You just want to be in a dream.
Evans admitted killing Alana.
Basically, I killed her.
But his defence claims he was insane at the time.
Anthony was a chronic schizophrenic.
I will need medical assistance.
He didn't know what the hell he was doing. He didn't know what the hell he should be doing.
The prosecution will argue it was a brutal murder.
By cutting her throat with this knife.
If found guilty, Anthony Evans faces a life sentence.
How say you? Are you guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
September 6, 2010. Day one of the trial in the Supreme Court of Western Australia.
It was a tragedy that, looking back on it, seemed to have a kind of an air of almost inevitability about it.
It was about 6 months before it happened. They met at a bus stop, and Alana was really in a bad way, and he was there sort of like a savior.
Meeting Anthony, he's a very gentle, softly spoken man. He looks like he must be in there for having, stolen a packet of cigarettes from Woolworths. He's not some kind of stereotyped psychotic killer, far from it.
We lost Alana almost 3 years ago. It's been a long time. We just want this trial done and over with, professionally and ethically, and we want to get on with our lives.
We are entrusted with Anthony's life, and I think we all want to have that feeling that when we walk out in 2 weeks' time, whatever the verdict, we'll know there's nothing more we could do. And that's how you live with yourself and move on to the next case.
He's my son. He's still got a life, and if we don't stick behind him, who's gonna?
Anthony's parents, Rod and Sandra Evans, will attend every day of the trial.
Members of the jury, Anthony Thomas Evans is charged that on the
12 jurors have been impanelled. None can be shown on camera.
For the next couple of weeks, can you put a bubble around yourself in respect of this case? Talk about it among yourselves, but not with anybody else. And the same goes for tweeting, Facebook walls, and anything else. That is because it is only the verdict of 12 of you that counts. Nobody else's opinion, nobody else's matter.
It's a usual description to describe a judge in part as an umpire, but more particularly the judge's principal role really is to ensure as far as possible that the accused and the state both have a fair trial.
One of the arts of being a barrister is trying to tell a story, make it interesting, and you can only be persuasive if you do that. And I'm a great believer in agreeing as much as you can and being short and punchy and make your points, get in, get out.
My strategy will be to the prosecutor's duty of presenting all the available and reliable and relevant evidence, and arguing the case that the accused intended to cause grievous bodily harm to the victim, which is the intent required to prove the crime of murder.
At the very start of the trial, the defence makes a key admission.
Mr Edwardson.
If Your Honour pleases, before my learned friend opens, I wish to make a formal admission. The accused makes the following admission. It is admitted that on 13 November 2007 at Girraween, Anthony Thomas Evans caused the death of Alana Marie Dakin.
The defence seeks a not guilty verdict due to unsound mind or a conviction of manslaughter.
What Anthony has effectively admitted to is that his actions caused the death of Alana. So the question for the jury to determine is how and why, and it's really the why more than the how.
Mr Foreman, ladies and gentlemen.
Opening addresses to the jury outline the prosecution and defence cases.
Sometime after midnight and before 3 a.m, on the morning of the 13th of November 2007, Anthony Thomas Evans, the accused man, killed his girlfriend, Alana Marie Dakin, by cutting her throat with this knife. Between 5:30 and 7:20 on that same morning, he confessed to the killing in an audio-visually recorded interview with police that you'll see played during the evidence today. It'll be essentially the first evidence the prosecution presents to you. The prosecution has to prove three things. One of them we've been relieved of proving by the formal admission, but the other two are that the accused caused the death of Alana Dakin unlawfully, and the other is that when he caused her death, he intended to do her some grievous bodily harm. If we prove those two things, along with the fact that the accused man killed Alana Dakin, then we will have proved the crime of murder, and we have to prove those things beyond reasonable doubt. If we prove the fact of the killing and the unlawfulness of the killing, but not that the accused intended to do grievous bodily harm, we will have proved the crime of manslaughter.
The stakes are as high as they can be. If Anthony gets found guilty of murder, he's going to get life imprisonment and he's going to spend a very, very long time in jail. So it's an enormous responsibility, and I don't think you'd do your job properly if you weren't nervous.
This is not a whodunit trial. This is a trial that is all about why Anthony Evans killed Alana Dakin. On face value, this is a tale as old as time. Anthony and Alana met, fell in love, and ended up hurting each other. Anthony's reactions to the volatile relationship between himself and Alana were profoundly influenced by two important factors. The first was that Anthony was, and even after the death, remained completely in love with Alana and motivated by a desire to save her from herself. The second was that Anthony was a chronic schizophrenic. There's always a potential for jurors to be cynical about a person's mental health. And there's a natural reaction, for example, when so much is at stake, for people to think maybe he's bunging it on, maybe he's feigning it. That's certainly not the impression I've got.
And I call Bruce Richard Bowers, page 201.
The prosecution calls its first witness, the detective in charge of the investigation.
Now, did you, in the end, interview Mr Evans on videotape?
I did.
Did that interview begin at about 5:30 in the morning?
Yes.
And did he appear to be intoxicated?
No, he didn't appear to be overly intoxicated to me.
Could you smell alcohol on him?
No, I couldn't.
Did he appear to be overly tired?
It was early in the morning, but no, not overly tired. He did make a comment to me.
And what was that?
He said, if you want to do that, I would request you do it sooner rather than later. That way you'll get the best out of me.
The central evidence in the case is Anthony Evans' police record of interview.
At this stage, Your Honour, I seek to play the interview. I hand it up. It runs, as I say, for approximately 110 minutes, so we're not going to get...
It was recorded just hours after Alana was killed.
Anthony, I'll just let you know now that everything we do and say has been video recorded. Okay. Can you just give us a brief appreciation of your relationship with Alana?
We're engaged to be married.
Mm-hmm.
She's the first and only person I'll ever be in love with. And,
Okay.
basically, I killed her. Leading up to the actual process of the killing, I will need medical assistance on trying to understand that. She's been the aggressor in the relationship, and she won't take no for an answer. And when she gets violent, I try to walk away, and she's she's a very angry girl, and
The video is what tells you everything you need to know as a jury about the accused, how he was talking, thinking, behaving around about the time of the incident. And from my perspective, I think it very much supports our contention that he wasn't of sound mind. But obviously the prosecution, as they said in their opening, will say otherwise. But it's probably the most crucial piece of evidence in the whole trial, quite frankly.
the domestic violence was getting out of hand, and her answer to everything was just to sell everything and buy a camper van and head off into the sunset, as long as there was a bottle shop on the way, I guess. Which I sympathised with her.
The prosecution case is so centred on the interview. I mean, I watched it within months of the events, and I've watched it again since, and each time I've watched it, I've got the personal impression that he was not psychotically thought disordered, that he was describing accurately and reliably events for which he is criminally responsible.
I ended up with a knife in my hand, but I can't remember the exact reasons for grabbing the knife, because usually she grabs the knife, but for this time I grabbed it. I admit I grabbed it, and there was no intention to do it, to stab her or anything. But then in the heat of the moment it became clear to me that I had some kind of, it was not like a thought to stab her, it was more like a challenge. Not by me, but by her. Do it then. And then it became egotistic, drunk, emotional, egotistical, knife in the hand. Where's this going? And the fact that there's just so much trouble being in our relationship. And then she wanted the knife, and I said, no, I'm not giving you the knife. And then she stuck her hand out and said, I want to die, cut my arm. I said, no, fucking cutting your arm. Well, I'll put the knife away. And I put the knife away, and then she said, I want the knife, I want the knife. And I can't remember the lead up to it, but at one point she's gone like that, and I've just slashed her arm there, and it opened up so much that I could see all the tendons, and in shock I've just thrown the knife on the ground, grabbed her, pulled her down, grabbed the rug, put it on her arm, grabbed the pillows, put the pillows on her. She's going, what are you doing, what are you doing? And the blood was just gushing out of this.
I'll have to say it's probably one of the most unique interviews I've ever done in my career. His graphic detail of the events was somewhat matter-of-fact, as if he was making a cup of tea in many of the comments he was making. I think I'd be accurate by saying it was relatively cold, it was somewhat shocking, and many of the things I heard, I was considering to myself, how could a human being do this to another person?
And at this particular point we started arguing over who was the stronger person. And she said, oh, I'm the stronger person. I said, I'm sick of this shit, Lana. You're not the stronger person. You've got to stop fucking getting us into this shit. I am, you're not. I am, you're not. And then I just remember grabbing the knife and I sliced her neck close.
The most challenging aspect of this case is trying to convey to the jury that he was psychotic at the time of the killing. And the reason it's difficult in this case is that the interview has this, he demonstrates a sort of blunted expression. He shows no real emotion when he's describing the circumstances of the killing.
And when you pushed the knife in, was it going away from you?
Yeah, sort of like filleting, yeah.
So across from here to there?
That way.
Yeah. So from my neck first?
You'll cross this part, I guess.
Yeah. So
I really don't know why I did it. I just got confused and anger, combination of anger and confusion. So.
The court hears all 2 hours of Evans' version of the night's events.
Thank you. Mr. Edwards.
In cross-examination, the defence focuses on Evans' mental state after the killing.
Now, the interview itself when it was conducted was, can I suggest, of an investigation nature, wasn't it?
Yes.
Now, when you commenced the interview, did you have any knowledge at all of him, in the sense of him having received, one way or another, extensive psychiatric treatment over an extended period of time?
No, I had no understanding of the accused and I'd never met him prior.
Would you agree with the description that he was a bit of a rambling conversationalist from beginning to end?
I wouldn't say rambling conversationalist, but it was an investigative interview.
Yes.
And I did want to focus on particular points, and at stages it was difficult to keep the accused on track.
Would it be fair to say that although there might have been some sort of slurring, predominantly there was a sort of a blunted emotional expression from beginning to end, no matter what topic he was discussing?
Yes, I'd agree with that.
Did you, or to your knowledge, did any police officer present him to a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a medical practitioner to evaluate his mental state?
No. In the interview, he actually mentions that I wish I could join her, or gives reference to joining the deceased.
Yes.
So when he was lodged at the police lockup, I actually escorted Mr Evans personally, yes, and I gave them a briefing that there's possibly some health issues at play there.
Yes, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a long day when you have nothing to do but watch the screen. I'm well aware of that.
I think day one for a jury is just an overwhelming day of what the, they've had to sit there and listen to evidence about knives being slashed and slashed like a filleting a fish and all these sorts of things. I think there's just a lot of loose and random thoughts likely to be in the jury's mind, but I certainly would expect the jury at this point would at least have some doubts about his sanity. And if that's where we've got them to, then we'd be pretty happy with that.
A lot of the witnesses tomorrow will be sort of routine pieces in the puzzle. The evidence of the previous domestic violence incidents will be raised tomorrow. Some witnesses whose evidence per se is not contentious, but the interpretation of it is highly contentious, such as Bruce with the interview. The interview is the key document in the trial.
Alana's parents decide not to attend much of the trial. They have custody of her 7-year-old son from a previous relationship.
He's our little ray of sunshine. So.
Close friend Glenys Mayton attends on their behalf.
I'll take notes all the time just to make sure,
Well, we really appreciate that because, our situation and our feelings towards actually attending. We prefer not to attend this particular because we don't need to view or listen to the goriness.
No, I wouldn't want you to either,
Day 2. Overnight, the defence team discovers potentially damaging material has been published on the internet.
This was a retrial, but there was a previous trial that the accused man, Mr Evans, had been sentenced, and articles about the sentencing itself and then about the appeal. So we're concerned that if any jurors got onto that site, they will have full knowledge now, not only that this was a retrial, but what happened at sentencing and what happened in the initial trial. So we've asked His Honour to sit at 9:30 this morning to deal with this in the absence of the jury, but to see whether we can have some directions that can overcome this or possibly even abort the trial.
The retrial happened because essentially the Court of Appeal found that the judge made several important errors in the way in which she directed the jury they could use the evidence that was led at trial, and also because of the nature of some of the evidence that was led at trial.
Justice McKechnie examines the offending website.
Oh, that's helpful. Accused murder to be retried.
Yes.
The jury has not been told this is a retrial for fear of prejudicing Evans' case.
Out of an abundance of caution, it's my submission, or our submission I should say, that a further strong and clear direction from Your Honour is paramount in the circumstances.
Justice McKechnie gives special directions to the jury.
Yesterday morning, before the trial started, I gave you instructions concerning not conducting internet searches. Something has arisen which causes me to reinforce those directions and explain again why this is so. If jurors conduct searches, then neither counsel can deal with it. They can deal with evidence in court, but if they don't know about it because you've done it privately, they simply have no opportunity, and so it is unfair on the parties. Material on the net these days is pervasive. Everything gets reported. But it's a mistake to think that everything is accurate. And in some of the coverage I have seen, there are, in fact, errors. Now, I can confirm to you that this is a retrial. There has been a trial, and this is a separate trial. The verdict in that trial was set aside by a unanimous Court of Appeal. So then anything that has gone before is simply irrelevant to your task, which is to find the facts on this case. We'll now continue the trial, and if the witness could be recalled.
An aborted trial is averted. Now the prosecution calls the first police officer who attended the crime scene.
What did you do when you got there?
Inside the house, I saw a lady inside with two St John's ambulance officers. I've asked the lady to leave the premises.
Did you later find out that that lady's name was Sandra Evans?
I did know it was Sandra Evans from
I beg your pardon.
when I first saw her, yeah.
And what did you do there?
Well, basically, I've also asked the St John's guys to leave. As the first officer left, he said to me that he made the comment, she's dead.
What did you do after you heard that?
There's a hallway as you enter the premises, and the room was pretty much on the right as you walked in.
Okay, much as we see on the plan?
Yep.
And what did you see when you looked into that room?
The body of a female laying on her back.
Western Australia's chief forensic pathologist gives evidence about the wounds that caused Alana's death.
Now, for the purposes of this case, an autopsy was performed on the body of the deceased lady, Alana Marie Dakin.
Yes, that's right.
That was not performed by you, but by your former colleague, Dr. Margolius,
yes,
who recently passed away.
Yes.
All right. What cause of death did she report?
She said the cause of death was a penetrating wound to the neck.
Very well.
The prosecution decides against showing any crime scene images of Alana's body.
Photographs of the injuries included some extremely graphic, horrible images. And you don't want to subject a jury to that unless you absolutely have to. But if you can do it in a schematic way, then it's better to do it that way. It also made them much clearer.
The first knife wound penetrated Alana's right chest, exiting in the armpit.
Across the front of the shoulder, through the muscle.
The second knife wound was fatal.
It's this injury which is in fact the most important in terms of causing death, because here, of course, you have the jugular vein and the carotid artery, the main vein and artery in the neck on the left side. And one of those was cut, the left jugular vein was cut.
But you've made the point that it is, in essence, two separate wounds joined up.
Yes, there's a penetrating component towards that right side, and then the incised slicing type component towards the left side.
Would the penetrating wound have been fatal?
No, not at all. I wouldn't expect so. It's simply tunneled beneath the skin through the muscle and the fat. It hasn't of itself cut any major blood vessels, no arteries, no veins.
The incised part of the wound, how quickly fatal would that wound have been?
It's hard to say, but you would normally expect just a few minutes, maybe 2, 3, 4 minutes.
And the knife that you have on the table there, Exhibit E, would that be capable of inflicting a wound of that type?
Yes, I think so. It's sharp enough at the point.
Now I'll move to a different area, if I can, and that is to do with some toxicology results that were found on examination of blood samples taken from both the accused and deceased.
Blood tests reveal whether Anthony and Alana were drug or alcohol affected. Taken hours after the killing, Anthony's sample is less reliable.
You know, on the average level, he could have, 9 hours previously, been at 0.135. Of course, he could have been less than that. He could have been 0.
Exactly. And if I can turn then to the Chemistry Centre report in relation to Alana Dakin, which is rather more detailed and more findings to report on.
Alana's blood sample is far more revealing.
It was measured at 0.259%, and the commonly accepted fatal level is 0.4.
Right.
So it's creeping up quite high.
The court hears about Alana's troubled life in a statement from her mother, Rose.
I'm the natural mother of Alana Marie Dakin. She is my only child. I gave birth to Alana on 6 November 1974 at Inuvik General Hospital in Canada. Alana had problems with alcohol. I would call her an alcoholic. I am also aware that Alana had problems with prescription medication, including Valium.
Yeah.
When Alana was sober, she was a really a lovely person.
Hey.
She once said to me, sometimes I feel like two people. There's the really good Alana, and then there's the really sad and bad Alana. At that time, I couldn't understand, but years later, I did realize that she was suffering from depression. And around the time that we found out about her real father, Peter, committing suicide, she was really suffering from depression. She was getting help for it. And gradually, she started getting medication. But it just seemed like the medication was getting more and more and more, and she seemed to be taking a lot of pills, and
But I think that we always looked at alcohol as being the problem that she had.
And she could just have a few drinks, and she'd be like really drunk, with the Valium.
It would take over her.
Yeah,
it would consume her to the extent that she'd become the aggressor from time to time, because she needed to continue down that road.
The prosecution argues the killing can be explained by the couple's dysfunctional relationship, not by Evan's insanity. The turbulent relationship now becomes the prosecution's key focus.
We think the history of domestic violence is an essential part of the background against which the events of the killing itself have to be understood, and that the death was the culmination of a violently dysfunctional relationship in which the deceased was alleged to have been the initiator of much of the violence, although she was the ultimate victim of the final violence.
3 weeks before the killing, domestic violence between Anthony and Alana escalated. Police attended a number of incidents at the couple's home.
Now, when you first saw Alana Dakin, what did you notice about her?
She had bruising and swelling to the left side of her face, and she was handcuffed to the front of her body.
And what was her demeanour?
She was intoxicated.
Was she cooperative with you or other officers?
No, not at all.
Now, did you speak to Anthony Evans on that occasion?
I did, yes. I placed him under arrest and conveyed him back to Warwick Police Station, where he took part in a video record of interview.
And during the course of that interview, did he say anything to you about the injuries that you'd seen on Alana Dakin?
He claimed it was self-defence, that she was holding a knife, and to overcome her, he punched her several times to the side of her face to get her to drop the knife.
Did you charge anyone with anything?
No, we didn't.
Did you take any other action in relation to either Anthony Evans or Alana Dakin?
We issued Alana with a 24-hour police order to keep her away from the address and away from Anthony.
All right.
Police were called to a second incident a few days later.
Before you got into the house, did you have any conversation with Mr. Evans?
Yes, I did. And he told me that they'd both been drinking. They had an argument, that she pulled a knife. He had to knock the knife out of her hand. He thought he might have broken her hand.
And so when you went into the house, what were you alert to do?
Well, we were obviously cautious because we were advised that there may have been knives used. And we found Alana in one of the bedrooms on the floor. I noticed her hand was quite swollen.
And you became aware that Ms. Dakin was taken to hospital and treated there?
Yes.
All right. And you did speak to her?
Yes, I did.
She declined to make any complaint, and no formal interviewing was done of Mr. Evans, and no charges were laid against any person as a result?
That's correct.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Marino.
Alcohol was consumed, violence broke out, police were called. Well, when you're seeing instances of that magnitude, you kind of think, well, shit, this is only going to escalate or end up one way. And that was our big fear. But, you know, you kind of wake up in the morning thinking, oh, well, it's daylight. OK, what's going to happen tonight, you know?
The last reported incident took place 2 weeks before the killing.
Did you speak to Anthony Evans in particular?
Yes, I did.
And what was your conversation with him?
Anthony told me what had happened that night, and I gave him considerable advice regarding gaining a violence restraint order and ceasing the relationship. I stressed that obviously the relationship was never going to go anywhere, it was never going to be a positive one, and that it was my advice that they separate and not see each other ever again.
Now, you've told us that Anthony told you what had happened that night. What did he tell you?
He said that Miss Dakin was drinking heavily. She was intoxicated. They had decided to go to Mum and Dad's place to sort it out, and that when they were driving in the car, Miss Dakin tried to take the steering wheel, and he was forced to push her away on several occasions.
What happened then?
We went to Mr. and Mrs. Evans's house, where Alana was in a bedroom downstairs.
And did you personally deal with her while she was there?
I spoke to her for a brief moment, but she was extremely abusive. She had bruising to her face, which appeared to be old injuries. She was extremely intoxicated, and she wanted vodka. She wanted alcohol. She was screaming for vodka.
What ended up happening?
We, after speaking, came to the conclusion that Alana had to be removed from the house, and we presented her with a 72-hour notice, so she couldn't, in fact, contact the Evanses at all for 72 hours.
What time of the day was it by this stage?
Oh, it was probably 2:30 in the morning. We eventually, I made a phone call and took her to the complainant's address.
And when you say the complainant, that's Jane Mayton?
That's correct, yes, Jane Mayton.
You refer to her as the complainant because she was the person who called the police?
Originally, she was the person who called us, yes.
All right, not because she had particularly anything to complain about in a technical sense. In terms of your personal dealings with Anthony Evans, how would you describe his demeanour?
I found him to be quite an okay person. He understood what I was saying. He was quite personable. He understood that this relationship was at crisis point. So I understood that he was going to seek a violence restraint order.
All right.
In cross-examination, the defence seeks to draw more evidence about Alana's behaviour. It will be used to support a very different argument.
Well, the psychiatric evidence suggests that if he's placed under stress, for example, if he's subjected to some form of domestic violence, that's likely to exacerbate a psychotic episode. In other words, it's more likely in those circumstances that he might be psychotic at the time of the killings. Did she, generally speaking, appear to be quite irrational?
Yes, she was irrational. She was aggressive.
When you say she was aggressive, what do you mean?
Well, when I put her in or when we placed her in the back of the police vehicle, she retained her bag. I wanted her bag. I climbed into the back of the police vehicle to take the bag from her, and she spat into my hair and onto my jacket.
Was she restrained at that stage?
No.
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 Was she subsequently restrained?
No.
No.
She had injuries.
Yes.
And we were obviously concerned we wouldn't handcuff her with those injuries.
Alana's best friend, Jane Mayton, is called. The prosecution believes she will help frame the couple's troubled relationship. But the team proceeds with caution. It was Mayton's hearsay evidence that was most contentious in the first trial.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I will give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
The evidence that Jane Mayton gave at the last trial included some very graphic accounts by Alana to her of the way in which she said that the accused had injured her. Now, those things were hearsay evidence. They were the subject of one of the successful grounds of appeal at the first trial.
We had concerns because Jane Mayton was obviously a very close friend of Alana, and the way in which she conducted herself outside of the court on the last occasion made it very clear that she was very protective of Alana and very hostile to Anthony. And we as a defence team were very concerned that she would take any opportunity to present it to her in court to say things that would be damaging to our case.
And so at this trial, we were careful to tell Jane before she gave evidence that she'd be giving evidence differently this time because of the court's ruling. At the time that you first met Alana, was she a recovering alcoholic?
Yes, she was. She was sober.
And for what proportion of the time that you knew her was she sober?
She was sober the entire time I knew her until the last few months.
Did she have a very traumatic event, a sexual assault?
Yes, she did.
After which she relapsed?
Yes.
When you first met Anthony and spoke to him, he told you how much he loved her and
yes,
seemed like a big friendly giant, I think, in your words.
Very much so.
Now, on that first occasion that you met Anthony, Alana, I think, had left the room after first introducing you.
Mm-hmm.
And she came back in and Anthony gave her a can of beer?
Yes. Yes, he did.
All right. After having first met Anthony, did you see less of Alana over the ensuing months?
Yes, I did. She kept very much to herself.
And on the occasions that you did see them, how did Anthony seem in his demeanour?
Moody.
Did you notice that Alana was continuing to drink alcohol?
Yes, I most certainly did.
And did you next hear from her on the night of the 29th of October 2007?
Yes, she sent me text messages.
I don't need to go into the detail of what the text messages were, but from their content, did they cause you to go around to 272 Marangaroo Drive? What did you do?
I knocked and knocked. There was no answer. I was starting to get increasingly worried.
All right. Did you then decide to call 000?
Yes, I did.
All right, and ask the police to find out where Alana was?
I knew she was in danger from the tone of the text messages. I called the police. They attended.
Yes.
I understand. Be careful just to answer the question I asked you, Ms Mayton, that's all right. The rule against hearsay is a complicated rule and lawyers and judges get it wrong from time to time, and so we don't expect lay people who aren't trained in the law to know precisely how to avoid answering a question in such a way as to create an impermissible prejudice. So we kind of had to control Jane's evidence quite tightly to ensure that she didn't make a mistake. And you understood that the police went to the other address, an address in Warwick, found Anthony and Alana there, and later you were contacted by them.
That's right.
And they asked if Alana could come to stay with you.
Yes.
Now, when the police dropped Alana off, did she appear to be intoxicated?
She did a bit, yes.
And did she appear to be injured?
Very much so.
I want you to just tell us what injuries you noticed on her.
I noticed bruising on her face. She had an injury to the top of her head. She had blood matted into her hair and spots of blood on her clothing. Her arm was bandaged.
Now, the following morning, did you take Alana to hospital for her to be treated for the injuries?
Myself and my mother took her to Sir Charles Gardner Hospital to receive treatment.
And among the treatments she received was there some stitches
to the head, and
her head?
She was advised that she'd need plastic surgery on her hand.
Jane had asked Alana after we brought her back from the hospital, she said, did the police or the hospital take any photographs of your injuries? Because they were extensive. And she says, no, nobody's taken any photos at all. And she said, well, if it's okay with you, I want to take photos of as many things as I can find. And it was used in the last trial.
That evidence at the first trial should never have been admitted before the jury. That's the reason we've got a retrial, and that's the reason why this jury is only going to consider the guilt or innocence of Anthony Evans on admissible evidence rather than prejudicial, inadmissible opinion.
All right. And did you see her again after that?
No. I took her to hospital and that was the last time I saw her.
All right. Thank you, Ms Mayton. That's the evidence.
The defence decides not to cross-examine.
I have to say I breathed a big sigh of relief when it was over. It was, we were terrified. She was the one witness we were very worried about, particularly because we didn't want her to cause the trial to abort. And I felt that in the end her evidence really didn't harm our case at all.
But the restrictions on her evidence leaves Jane Mayton feeling the full story of her dead friend is not being told.
Even when I did see her on occasion intoxicated, I never once saw the Alana that they're speaking about in trial. She was just such a kind person, such a kind soul.
There were serious things going on with that relationship, but we couldn't pinpoint it. I was up at Broome at the time. Rose was down for only for a couple of days, basically, and she was witness to all these incidents. Her daughter lying there, black and blue in the face, you know. And how did this happen, you know? It's horrific.
It was terrible, just terrible.
There's been this, in my opinion, this lean to try and turn it into a domestic violence case, that Anthony's mean, woman basher, blah, 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 and which is not the case. That's not the way he's been brought up. He's been brought up with good values and that. He's got issues that have made life difficult for him as well. I think as the time went on, yeah, he was finding the situation harder to cope with.
Day 3. The prosecution now turns to Alana's movements the day before the murder. After the last police intervention, Alana was ordered to stay away from Anthony. She was admitted to a women's refuge.
And can you remember how she appeared physically?
Alana had her arm in a sling.
Now, what are the rules at Zonta in relation to drinking alcohol?
It's classified as a dry house. It does state on the documentation that clients can be asked to leave the accommodation facility, should they do that.
Now, at about 6 o'clock that evening, did Alana approach you?
Alana came to me and stated that she'd consumed a bottle of alcohol.
And how did she seem physically then?
She didn't seem drunk or intoxicated to me, but given that you've had a whole bottle of alcohol, then I would say that yes, she was intoxicated.
Okay. And what did you do?
Basically at that point, I had to advise Alana that the house rules had been broken, that she would be evicted and that I would be making contact with crisis care.
Did Alana provide you with information suggesting she had somewhere to stay?
Alana said that she'd made contact with a friend and that she was going to be picked up by them. So I had a conversation with Alana regarding who that friend was, whether it was male, thinking that she may return to the perpetrator, which is often the case. And so we'd had a discussion about that.
But at the conclusion of that discussion, Alana packed her belongings and left.
That's correct.
And you didn't see where she went or who collected her, if anyone?
No, I just visually saw Alana walk to the end of the driveway and then I had to continue on with my shift and lock the door, and that was the last I saw of her.
The friend Alana called was Anthony Evans.
Yes, I went to this address and picked her up. I'm not exactly sure what the refuge is all about, but she asked me to park at the house next door.
4 hours later, they were recorded arriving at a local bottle shop.
There was a female in the passenger seat and a male in the driver's seat, and I noticed that the female had a broken arm.
And did you notice anything about the male? How would you describe him?
He was quite thin. He had a shaved head, but only like around the sides. He had a bit on the top. He reminded me of an old school bogan, how they used to dress when I was younger.
Okay. Back in the day?
Yeah.
All right. Did you notice anything about what the female was wearing?
She had a lovely black, white and red dress on.
When the lady got out, or at any stage after you first noticed her, did you notice anything else about her that you didn't at first pick up?
She had bruises on the right side of her face.
Did you notice anything about whether she appeared affected by alcohol?
She seemed to be a little bit unsteady, but she definitely wasn't intoxicated. I wouldn't even say she was drunk, because she wasn't slurring her words. She could walk, but she just seemed a little bit shaky on her feet.
Okay, so what did she do?
She actually came up to the section of the bottle shop where the white wines were stored in the fridge.
Was she able to pick out a particular wine?
She couldn't find the one she wanted, and then she actually saw one that she'd drunk before and selected that one.
And what was that one?
Carrington Blush.
Did you buy a bottle of Carrington Blush?
She bought 2.
Okay, and how much did they cost altogether?
Altogether it was $14, $15.
And did you notice anything else about the lady as the transaction was progressing?
When I put the bottles down, she was putting the money on the counter and her hands were shaking a lot.
What was her manner towards you?
Oh, she was lovely. She was very quiet, very quietly spoken, polite.
And did the male come into the store?
No.
Did he communicate with you or her while he was in the car?
When she was looking at the wines in the fridge, he yelled for her to hurry up, and that was it.
Right, it's now 20:52:24 on the counter, and the lady who you served has returned to the car.
These are the last recorded images of Alana. In 3 hours, she will be dead.
And I was the last one of the family to talk to Alana. She called my mobile. It's a little after midnight, and she just sounded like a little distant lost soul, you know. And I said to her, I said, Alana, do you realise what the time is? And she said, it's okay. I said, Alana, at this time, it's not the right time to talk. And I put the phone down. And that's all it was. And, you know, from what I understand, 2 hours later, she was dead.
Anthony's father, Rod Evans, is called to give evidence. He was the first to see Anthony after the killing.
I want to take you now to the early hours of the morning following the Tuesday the 13th of November. Were you asleep at your home on that morning?
Yes.
Did you get a knock on the door?
I did.
And what did you do when you heard the knock?
I got out of bed, went and answered the door, and Anthony was standing there.
What did he tell you the moment you opened the door?
Well, he was upset, he was muttering, and then he said that he thought Alana was dead, but he wasn't making a lot of sense at the time.
What did you do?
Yeah, tried to take stock of the situation. By that time, my wife had kind of overheard. She came to the door.
Did Anthony's presentation and what he said to you leave you in a state of some confusion?
Yeah, well, I really didn't know what to do.
All right. Was the upshot that Sandra said that she would go over to the house and you would stay with Anthony?
That's right.
Anthony came inside?
He did.
You gave him a bit of a wide berth because you didn't really quite know what to do?
Well, he sat at the table, then he made himself a coffee. I just wasn't too sure what the hell to do.
All right. Not long afterwards, Anthony asked to see his brother Wayne.
That's correct.
And you got Wayne up?
Yes.
And he went down, and then you spoke to Sandra on the phone?
Yeah, she just said it doesn't look good.
All right. And very shortly after that, some police officers arrived?
Yes.
And they asked who Anthony was, and he identified himself?
Yes.
They read him his rights and arrested him?
Yes.
All right, Mr Evans, I'm not going to trouble you any further.
Mr Evans, if you could just bear with me briefly. I want to just...
The defence takes the opportunity to draw crucial evidence on Anthony's state of mind.
When Anthony was staying at your house. Now, I just want to very briefly ask you a little bit about the way Anthony presented when he, for the first time, spoke to you, when he said, I think your words were, I think Alana's dead.
Yes.
You also said that he was muttering?
Well, he was just sort of muttering to himself and not sort of speaking clearly, apart from saying, I think Alana's dead, I think Alana's dead. He was either in shock or something, I don't know, but he certainly wasn't thinking clearly or acting clearly.
Before this particular occasion, this dramatic night that you're now describing, have you from time to time observed Anthony saying and doing things which are quite strange?
Yeah, in an earlier period, yeah, he used to have his moments of...
Are you able to give us any idea of what sort of observations along those lines that you've seen?
We went through a period where he claimed he was sort of in touch with the spiritual world, getting messages from the TV, but yeah, he believed he had contact with a greater world, or however you want to put it.
And did that cause you yourself to have him admitted?
Yes.
Do you know when that was?
Oh, it was probably around about July, August of 1999.
Right, and back then when that happened, how did Anthony react to you taking the drastic step of having him admitted?
Well, at that time, once again, not knowing a hell of a lot what to do, I'd contacted relevant experts, if you like. They came and assessed him, and then they said they wanted to get him into hospital and assess him further.
Mm-hmm.
So his reaction to me was, yeah, he felt I'd betrayed him and he wasn't happy with me.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you, Mr. Evans.
And, Your Honour, with that, that is the case for the prosecution.
After 3 days, the first phase of the prosecution case is over. The team's key aim has been to frame the murder in a context of escalating domestic violence.
The prosecution case is primarily in the video interview. The other witnesses' evidence was of lesser importance, but just little pieces in the puzzle, and it all went according to plan, smoothly. Not a lot of cross-examination, not a lot of areas of dispute, and very quickly.
Anthony Evans' legal team now prepares to present his defence.
I'm always pessimistic. My learned senior is always overly optimistic. It's not over till it's over, but so far we're pretty happy with how it's gone.
But the Dakin's close friend Glenys Mayton is concerned at the trial's progress.
You know, it just doesn't look good, Marius, and I'm so sorry. He's finished, yes, he's finished. You both felt quite positive about what Paul was doing, and that's why I say maybe he's got something to pull out of the hat during the defence. You know, I just hate the thought that he might get off even with manslaughter or insanity, you know, that the insanity plea will be accepted and he'll just be put away, and if it's at the Crown's pleasure, then he could be out any time, and he would never have really paid for what he's done. That's what hurts the most. He's not paying for what he's done.
Yeah, we certainly hope that there will be justice. We need the system to work for us, and put this bastard away so he can't hurt anybody else. And we hope this jury can see through the defence, that Anthony Evans was totally sane at the moment he committed this deed, and that he wasn't insane.
Well, yeah, the way I see it, he's my son. He's still got a life, and if we don't stick behind him, who's gonna?